Few things could be more important in life than what we decide to put in our mouths. Yet it seems as though this critical decision has for the most part been put in the hands of others. Where throughout most of human history food came from where people lived, now it comes from everywhere but where they live. The focus today is convenience and cost with little understanding of what we're actually eating. Agriculture, once at the center of all culture, synonymous for the word place, today is a global industry with an array of mass-marketed products that in many minds is food in name only. It took a long time for me to understand this. My food story begins early in 2003. Up until then, food was far down on the list of things I spent time thinking about. It was something I took little pleasure from. As a single parent raising two boys, my responsibilities for cooking and shopping turned any enjoyment I had for food into something more like drudgery than pleasure. I followed the recommended dietary trends regarding what to feed my family, but that's as far as it went. The images imprinted on my mind by the food industry came from folksy packaging and brand icons. Food came from this mythical American breadbasket, made up of small family farms with well-maintained red barns, and chickens and cows roaming in the barnyards and pastures. Not once did it ever enter my mind to think about where the food we ate actually came from, or how it was produced, or how far it had traveled to reach the dinner table. I had total faith in the government agencies watching over it all, never suspecting the powerful influences exerted by big food and agriculture, whose goals are often in conflict with the health and well-being of the nation. Right around this time, I met the woman who was to become my partner. Her food influences were established early in life and still played a strong recurring role in the way she saw the world.
Food has been a way that I talk to other people. It's a way I communicate what I care about and that I care about them. Growing up, food was always an important part of our family experiences. My mother was a wonderful cook. She cooked everything from scratch, and I learned how to cook at her elbow. And as I grew up and became a teenager and then a young adult, I became very interested in food as a way to earn a living, to own a restaurant. That was my dream. But everything changed for me about the time that I was 20, when a very good friend of mine walked into my apartment kitchen one day, swept all the white flour and white sugar and anything packaged off the shelves, and left me with a copy of an Adele Davis book about nutrition. I read everything that I could get my hands on about nutrition for a number of years, and that changed the way I approached food. I became interested in nutrients. So I wanted fresh food because it had vitamin C or it had vitamin B, and that was really the governing idea in my food selections and the way I cooked. When I got married and I had a baby, I continued in the tradition of my mother, cooking our food from scratch, providing the best food that I could buy for my family, because that was just exactly the best way for me to show how much I cared about them. It was a message from me that I loved them, I felt food was important, and that I was willing to put the effort into it so that they'd have the best food that I knew how to make. It wasn't until Michael and I began making this film that I began to understand food in a different light. It shifted from purely nutritional and purely organic whenever possible to a larger spectrum of why food matters, what impact food has, and what decisions I make actually affect the soil, my community, other people working in the food business. As part of researching our film, we began to travel and meet farmers and millers and chefs and people who were thinking about all of the impacts that food has on the environment and on individuals. And as we spoke with these people, we started to realize that these were people that we wanted to be around. We wanted to learn from them. We wanted to bring a lot of their ideas about what really healthy food is into our own home.
What you begin to notice almost immediately when you become more curious about the food you're eating is that the people who are growing it, almost without exception, are remarkable. We visited small, diverse family farms that for the most part were serving their local communities through CSAs and farmers markets. After every interview, we would find ourselves laughing out loud in the car on the ride home, amazed by our experience with these people who were total strangers but had been so gracious and forthcoming about their everyday lives. What we discovered very early on was that these people were opening up to us because we shared a common bond, that being our love of fresh food and hands-on farming with few inputs and no pesticides. Most of the farmers we met hadn't come from traditional farming backgrounds. They were young, almost all were well educated. It's probable their education had a lot to do with how they faced the many challenges associated with the lifestyle. For them, almost without exception, growing food the way they do is about values, honest work they can be proud of, and contributing something really meaningful to society.
I grew up on Air Force bases. By the time I was in high school, I landed in South Georgia, which is how I initiated my love for the state of Georgia and most things Southern. I went to college in Valdosta at Valdosta State University, studied anthropology, and just got a real itch to do traveling. I went to Central America for 3 months, and I thought it would be really neat to try to visit and work alongside folks that grow coffee, and mostly people that are doing organic and shade-grown coffee. In college, I developed a real interest in political economy of food products and also peasant studies and revolutionary movements, so El Salvador seemed like a perfect place for me to be. What hadn't occurred to me is that I knew nothing about working outside or growing things, so I was kind of like a thumb. I didn't have much practical experience to bring to my interest, so I came back to Georgia, got a job part-time working for a farmer east of Atlanta. Basically, I just fell into this. He gave me a lot of opportunities, and before I knew it, I had a chance to steward my own farm. Farming was never something that I had thought I would do. Having lived in South Georgia, there are plenty of people that I went to high school and college with whose parents pursued agriculture in some capacity. And I guess I just always thought that I just had never thought that would be the kind of work that interested me. So I was pretty surprised my first day working on a farm how much I enjoyed the physical labor and the real challenges of farming, figuring out a lot of the what seem they're more sophisticated than they look. The physics and chemistry and biology of a farm, the engineering and the systems of the flow of a farm. There's never an absence of things to learn or new experiences to have. You got it! You did it! You gotta take some of the southern heat out of these carrots. Let's let them sit for a minute.
We first met Joe in the spring of 2008. He was a favorite anthropology student of my brother, who had gone on to become one of the Atlanta area's better-known young organic farmers. This was a time of explosive growth in the food movement. The Omnivore's Dilemma, Michael Pollan's groundbreaking book, had just been published the previous summer and had generated huge interest and questions about where food was coming from and what we were eating.
We'd like folks to be able to come here and really see what a farm's about. It's really important, I think, for people to make the connection between how things grow and what they eat and how that affects them and us. You know, the basic premises, we try to grow organically. Sustainability is very much at the corner of our eye always. After 3 years of farming in Douglasville, Judith, my sweetheart and farm partner, we decided that this was a great opportunity to farm here in Decatur, Georgia, which is a little closer to the metro area of Atlanta. We didn't realize this when we first had a burning desire to farm, but buying a house inside the city and maintaining a house and needing income to manage a house and city living, or additional income to make that happen, we just hadn't considered all those aspects. Now Judith has an off-farm job to really quite nicely supplement our living expenses, and we farm about 3 miles from our house in Atlanta, which is of real value for my commute because it only takes me about 10 minutes to get here each day. The history of CSAs, to me, is incredibly interesting because it's wrapped up in the history of war. When the United States defeated Japan after World War II, Japanese mothers began to see tons of imports come into their country. And it was an important part of Japanese culture to eat Japanese food. And so they began to support their farmers by prepaying for shares early on in the season. They would also offer their labor to help these farmers out in order to get their food economy back on track. These ideas could have developed separately in Europe or disseminated from there. However, it became a large model there as well, where small growers were supported by their communities, folks that would share in the risks and rewards that a farmer would find in their season. For us, it's really important. We find ourselves a little less than economically well off in the beginning of the season, and so it helps put a lot of the upfront money at our disposal so we can do things like buy the proper supplies, buy the proper soil amendments, and hire labor, which is a huge expense.
I love these strawberries.
So good. I hope they hold on.
What?
I said I hope they hold on for another week or two. The plants still look strong, but they look like they want to send their daughters out soon.
Yeah. Oh God, they're good. Those are just amazing. All right.
Thanks,
Well, as
Margaret.
usual, that's fantastic.
Enjoy it.
I will. I will. I will.
there was great.
Well,
Actually, I was really, I was thinking it would be fun to do what Richard did, and just make some bread up there, just kind of wing it.
I became a baker after owning a restaurant for 5 years with two friends. There were three of us who owned the restaurant, and we did everything in-house. And we were all control freaks, so we didn't turn much over in those 5 years. It was very hard for us to hire out. And one of the things that I did in the restaurant was bake bread. And the bread was my real oasis from what is otherwise an incredibly hectic pace and environment. And I had a little corner in the kitchen and a small deck oven with bricks, and I baked the bread for the restaurant, and it was something that was entirely mine and something that I took a lot of pride in. And I knew that it was the first thing that was being eaten at the beginning of a meal, so I felt as though I had this really captivated audience. So I knew when we sold the restaurant that I wanted something much quieter than a restaurant, but I've really loved cooking and being a part of food since I was 8. I mean, really, quite seriously, when I was 8, I got a walk for my birthday and my first cookbook, and so I've really been a food person my whole life. And I still love cooking a lot. One of the things that was quite, for me, a little disorienting about a restaurant was the amount of inventory that we had to keep. And I felt as though, you know, to sustain a restaurant, you need to have a full pantry all the time. And what I love about the bread and what I love about the bakery is that I can operate with water, salt, and grain. And I love kind of managing that very simple list of ingredients. I'm going on 11 years of baking, and one of the things that I really love about what I have really grown to love as I've gotten to be a better baker is that I'm much more aware of what's happening with the dough and the bread at every stage. So I think that's another difference, actually, is that this is alive and it varies from week to week, and the weather and the temperature in the bakery and the temperature of the oven and the temperature and activity of the starter, and all those are variables that are constantly at play, and I have the joy and the challenge of trying to corral those into something somewhat consistent. But my bread is only fairly consistent. It's not consistent to the standards of supermarket breads and all kinds of commercial foods, which are, you know, absolutely uniform. I actually really love the fact that baking is a craft, that, you know, I believe that the best loaf of bread has already been baked. And that's one of the things that I love about a craft, is that, you know, what I'm pursuing is has already been done. For me, the artistic practice is all the ways in which baking and bread and the oven all have another kind of agency. And what I mean by that is that they invoke other kinds of responses, and those are the kinds of responses that I associate with an artistic practice. And I imagine, you know, that a lot of bakers who do what I do have had this experience where they have customers who are older, who grew up probably in Europe or Eastern Europe, in cultures where bread was a real essential part of the daily diet. And to give somebody a chance to rekindle those memories, the flavor of real bread, is a real privilege. I mean, that's sort of the dream of an artist, is to offer that. And it's, of course, also a real pleasure to have customers who just appreciate good bread. For me, the oven has also been a real beginning point for an artistic practice, where the oven has come to represent many things, a gathering place of very primal fire, and so that's for me what the artistic practice is. I have customers that that are very, very regular customers, and now that we have a winter market, I see them all year long. And then I'm always getting new customers, and they're just so surprised that that they can buy something that tastes so good and is so simple, and that their children like, and that they like, and yeah, and then you know, I suppose I start to build real relationships with these people, and that's one of the great joys of this. Certain people were onto whole grains long ago, you know, for sure, but people were certainly less informed about sourdough breads, about buying locally, about whole grains. That's only 11 years ago. When I was first trying to establish myself as a baker, I felt as though I was, you know, pushing contraband, you know. And so I was constantly having to make these very long kind of sales pitches, which felt incredibly awkward given that it was bread, that it was this thing that people have been eating for 6,000 years. And yet I had to explain why a sourdough bread, you know, had certain characteristics and qualities, and why organic made sense. And now I don't have to do any of that. And that's 10 years, that's remarkable to me. And now I have customers asking me questions like, you know, where's the grain from? Do you mill it yourself? Are these sourdoughs? And then people who actually bake then have another level of questions, you know. They want to know what kind of sourdough, what kind of oven. And so I don't have a sales pitch anymore. I don't need to sell the bread, and that's really remarkable. I get to spend the time, those momentary exchanges that I have with my customers every week. I get to really talk to them. I don't even have to. I'm not even talking about the bread or about the money. There's that exchange that's happening, and then there are all kind of conversant exchanges and not superficial ones, not about the weather. I mean, occasionally the weather comes up, but really we have become friends. And if I have a long line, people feel as though they can't really stick around and chat, and if the line is a little smaller, then I really can talk to people. I think historically the bakers and butchers and all of these food artisans were real resources for information, gossip, you know, news, politics. It was a place to really have those kinds of exchanges. So I really try and enhance that. I try to encourage it.
So to be a dairy farmer is a tremendous amount of work. There's no joke about that. The reward is that, you know, we are making food for people that nourishes people, that's free of chemicals. It's high quality, it tastes good, and it's really good for your body. We really honor the relationship of who grows your food. You know, we are growing someone's food. We are growing food that is growing children and growing families, and it's very honorable to us. It's a very noble position in society, even though it's not really recognized anymore as being very noble. Choosing to be an organic dairy farmer is not a good choice if you want to make $1 million. There are farmers that are tricked into believing that producing organic milk is going to make them more money. But the reality is that our costs to produce this milk are double in many cases to what a conventional farmer will pay. Our grain, for example, with the production of corn ethanol now, our grain has doubled in the past few years, and we spend about $4,000 every 20 days on grain here, and we're milking a pretty small herd of only 45 cows. That's actually a very small dairy in the scheme of dairies these days. There's a dairy farm up the road that milks 1,200 cows right now. Grain costs have gone through the roof, and we feed a very small amount of grain in the whole picture of what we give our cows. I mean, they're mostly getting grass that we made into baleage this summer on our farm, which is fermented grass. And grain is really a small part of what we feed, but feeding any grain, which has salts and minerals and as well as energy and protein in it, is very challenging to write a check for the grain bill.
Really what is almost happening is that we're going back to the way that people used to farm and the way that they used to be engaged in their community. And what's happened in the last 50 years is that the farms that used to be like that have all been wrapped up into one giant farm that, they come and pick the milk up, the community never goes to the farm, and they take it away and bottle it, and Walmart sells it, and you never have any connection with where that food comes from. And what's happening to me is that people are realizing that that connection is valuable, and it has a role in the health of our communities and the health of the people and the health of the land and the health of your neighborhood and your city and your town and however it's structured. And when you take that away, things start to not work so well. Being connected with people that consume our food and other farmers' food is really important, and it provides me with a lot of motivation to take care of all the little details that I have to take care of every day to make sure that I'm producing the absolute highest quality product that I can. We take it to the people, and they come back and they love it. And there's nothing that warms me more than watching that process and seeing the life come back into people's relationship with food, because they see how much we care and we see how much they care, and it sort of makes people realize that we're all in this together, and we need to care about these farmers, because if we don't, then they don't care about our food. And whatever, if you don't mind eating French fries and rice and commodity foods for the rest of your life that have no nutrition in them, then I guess, just let the farmers go by the wayside, and they'll just keep finding ways to produce more food with less people. And I just don't see that as the right path for our culture to go down.
I feel like we are so successful. Success isn't defined by this dollar amount. Success is defined by happiness, and we're paying our bills. If we weren't paying our bills, we'd probably be unhappy because it's stressful. And farming and finances and all of that business aspect is stressful sometimes. But in general, we are some of the most successful people I know, where we have tons of amazingly wonderful, beautiful, delicious food, 2 wonderful, beautiful kids, a farm and land. I mean, look how land rich we are. We have this beautiful, beautiful piece of property. our cows look great, our fields look great. That is happiness for us. I mean, all of that is what makes us want to get out of bed every morning. Sometimes wish I could check back in with the women from past, you know, back in a time where everyone farmed. My assumption is they did a lot of what I do still, you know, cooking, cleaning, childcare, processing food. But I feel like a lot more of what is my business responsibility now in this day and age, just that things that have to be done, returning phone calls, writing emails, going to the farmer's market, doing the taxes, those aren't things that they had to worry about. We worry that we won't be able to keep up the pace, but we assume it won't be for 10 or 15 years. And our hope is that by then we have a smooth enough operation running that we are able to step back a little bit. Our kids will be old enough to help us by then. I believe that we are the kind of farmers that young people who want to learn how to farm are going to continue coming to. We run a diversified farm. We have a lot going on. We have a lot to teach people. I think we both love to work so much that we'll never give it up. So I'm not sure we'll ever stop working. It's people I feel like that love to farm, that care about it so much, that they're so passionate about it. You have to love to work. If you don't love to work, you will be miserable. And so now, even the jobs that are the most mundane and boring and like washing milk bottles in the kitchen, you know, 1,000 bottles a month or something, we just try to see the fun in it. Like, oh, you can stand there, you can look out the window, you get to think, you can listen to some music, you know, and make the best of it because it has to happen and somebody's got to do it. So we'll do it. And I feel like a lot of the jobs that we do, you have to love it. You have to love this life.
We used to have farms in the United States that were diversified enough that if they didn't make any money on their milk for a year, there was maybe other things that did better and they made more money on, and things sort of were buffered against catastrophe. We don't have that so much anymore. You have dairy farms are dairy farms, vegetable farms are vegetable farms, chicken farms are chicken farms, and so they're all at the whim of their market. The reason why I'm diversified is because I want to, as much as I can over time, pull myself out of that game and be more connected with the people that buy my stuff. Because those are the people who care about me and support me and understand what's going on in my life and energize me to do the best that I can and to keep going when it's hard, and it's hard sometimes. And so then the other part of that is that, you know, my connection with people that buy my products gives a level of honesty that if they think I'm charging too much, you know, maybe if I was driving some super nice car around all the time or something and, you know, throwing money down everywhere, they might start to wonder why I charge $6 a gallon for milk. But most of the people that buy our milk, they know us well enough to know that we're not, you know, we're charging what we need to charge to make a living and make a little money, and I think that that's fine. In the dairy industry, you have a situation where there's all these middlemen, and they're the ones with the connection with the consumer, whether it's their connection with the grocery store, and the only connection from the milk to the consumer is the grocery store sales clerk. And so they don't see when they pay $3 a gallon for conventional milk at the store, they don't see this winter how many farms are going out of business because they're paying $3 and they're not paying $5. And they need to be paying $5 if they want all those farms to stay in business. I'm definitely trying to gain some level of quality of life. I love what I do, but I work incredibly hard year-round, and I think my challenge is to find ways that I can get away a little bit and still enjoy life, because eventually it'll catch up with me to the point where I won't enjoy the day-to-day existence of what I'm doing here, because I have to do it all the time and it never ends. And I like that for periods of time, but I think, you know, I'm challenging myself to be able to take steps back from that. I have a lot of people working here now that are dependable and are, you know, tuned in and know what's going on, to the point where I can, you know, for the first time, sometimes I can leave for a day and I don't have to, you know, milk cows and move chickens and do this and that and all these little details. And that sort of like rests my brain. And just, I find that even just 24 hours away from here gives me this, like, by the time I get back, I'm like, you know, I'm ready to do something. I'm ready to get going again, you know. And it's, but when you're just here doing it all the time, it's easy to get a little bit worn down.
Since we brought home our first Border Collie puppy named Lizzie 7 years ago, and later added another named Pi, a deep and enduring relationship has developed between us four. Being outside every day with them, in all kinds of weather, puts us in touch with the natural world and the seasons. The quiet walks in the woods and fields bring reveries of perfectly devised natural systems working in harmony and balance. Our dogs have opened our eyes to the possibilities that exist in all animals, how much alike we are, and how we share many of the same needs and desires in life.
I do think that this is a viable future for agriculture, raising animals the way that we do here. I've been personally doing this full time for almost 10 years now, and the changes that I've seen in 10 years is pretty remarkable when I think about it, actually. And I know that we're really just beginning to still scratch the surface of. People are clamoring more and more for meats that are raised responsibly, raised on responsible diets. It's grown in leaps and bounds, really, and I haven't, personally seen the end of it. Like, I don't foresee the end of it. I think it's only going to become more and more an issue. There's a lot of things that seem to keep lurking in the background, things that we don't necessarily know that are coming, but anything from avian flu to hoof and mouth disease or E. coli. I think of myself as an animal husband. When thinking about it, our egg-laying chickens, for example, our point of reference is that we raise egg-laying chickens. We're not egg producers. We're not focused on the egg per se. I mean, we need the eggs and we need the hens to be productive, but our emphasis, our starting point is with the animal themselves. So, like with the egg layers, for example, they're allowed to roost at night. They give themselves dust baths. We move them every other day in the field, so they're always getting fresh grass and fresh insects that might be around. We just go a long ways towards trying to let them live a little more natural life. The more that I'm around the animals and the more that I've been involved with raising the animals for ultimately meat or eggs, the more I realize that I can often understand when they are happy and when they aren't. And I know if you talk to me in 5 years from now, I'm sure, I would hope that I'll have learned that much more from just being around them. I would never think of myself as a bad guy when I got started, but the more that I've been doing this, the more that I really want to go out of my way to make sure that they have a nice life, because I've gotten to understand how strong their instincts are to carry out certain behaviors, whether it's sows farrowing or giving birth. Like we raise our pigs in small social groups. The sows always live together. They farrow naturally in the woods, and just really and it takes us a lot of extra effort, but really. 10 years of raising pigs that way, the more it's only confirmed my desire to head down that path originally. Like I feel more committed to it now than I did even originally. But raising the animals the way that we do, we spend a lot of time rotating them. Many of the animals rotate to new pasture daily. Some, pigs we might move every 3 weeks, a little longer between rotations. But because we are taking care of the land as we go, we're able to raise a lot more animals on the land in a way that's respectful towards the animals and respectful towards the land that we're raising them on. Because like for our sheep are strictly grass fed. We really need to take care of the land and then the grasses that the land's going to grow, because that's our feed for the sheep. We're saving females and boars that the industry would find kind of funny. I think for us, fat is wonderful as long as the animal's raised in a good way, is eating a good diet. I mean, that's really where a lot of the flavor resides. as well as a lot of vitamins and other minerals and things like that. But the industry, since the 70s, they've been looking for these long, lean animals, because they're marketing what's they call the other white meat, and that's not what we're about. We're about the pleasures of eating, raising things responsibly, and then enjoying eating them at the end. Yeah, conventional agriculture spent a lot of time taking all the variables out of life, I suppose, all the spice out of it. So really knocking things down to the base minimum. So, for example, like with the dairy cows in a 300 cow milking herd, they might all be bred by the same bull who might be 10 years old and came out of a farm somewhere else, and millions of cows all across the country are being bred by just a handful of bulls. I understand that they're looking for high milk production, and they have scorecards on what they're looking for from their animals. And if they think it's one of the best animals in that regard, I can understand why they make that decision, but it does seem pretty presumptuous, or it's the old adage of putting all your eggs in one basket. There could be a disease that could come along that animals haven't been that they haven't had to work out some sort of immunity with, and if they're all genetically related, I mean, the whole idea of having a variety of anything, and for animals to have to sexually propagate, is that you keep the variety in the species, and that helps you adapt to new and changing circumstances. So if a new disease were to come along, and all the cattle, if they're all related and they happen to be susceptible, they're in big trouble. As a good example. We've been sort of historically married to the animals for tens of thousands, maybe 10,000 years with some of the species, and it doesn't seem responsible if we're sort of husbanding them into the future, that if we get rid of all the genetic variability, it doesn't seem like we're doing a good job of stewarding. I don't want people to eat more and more meat. I know it's not healthy for you. The idea is that you treat yourself and your diet and the animals that are being raised for meat all a lot more responsibly than we have been as a society. I understand how the industrial food system went the way it did. I probably know it better than most, just from the fact that I've been raising animals this way. I can understand it takes a lot of sacrifice on all those working with them. All those things that happen in inopportune times, whether it's pigs farrowing when you finally get a date with your wife, or whatever it is. I can understand how you want to take some of those variables away. We're trying to raise them in a way that it introduces a lot more variables so that they have a more natural existence. So I can understand that, but I also feel like we owe the animals a lot through that 10,000 year relationship we've had with each other, to sort of neglect sort of their part in it, or their what they need to try to be somewhat satisfied, with their existence. Like you can't forget that, I don't think, and we can't forget it as a society, because we have this 10,000 year relationship with them. So I feel like we owe the animals our best creative thoughts to try to deal with that sort of those issues. Sure, it's complicated, but it's like, if it's not complicated, it's probably not worth trying. Like, you gotta put the effort into the things that. So I just feel like if we can treat the animals that we're raising better, it not only affects just the animals' lives, but it also affects the way we think about the world and probably our fellow human beings. Like, it just translates into a lot of different things that it just can't be neglected. We can't just stick them in a box and say this is what your lot in life is, and it seems like it makes it too simplistic. We've had a sort of a focus on a particular thing, with trying to be totally efficient, with not thinking about any other sort of goals or sort of values that we want to honor as a society. That we just went too far down one road. I understand that we need to be as efficient as possible and all those things, but you can't forget the other goals or values that we value as a society.
To work with the earth, to work with your hands, to have a feeling of satisfaction, to raise something from a seed to something that we eat. I mean, truly you're in touch with the miracle of life every single day, whether you choose to perceive that or not. And I don't always. I'll put in a long 16-hour day, and we'll be running around trying to fill orders, cut salad mix and pull carrots and wash everything and deliver it to town. I'll tell you what though, when I walk down at 9 o'clock to close the chicken hut, and that moon is up and that fog is sort of setting low, and it'll just have that 5 minutes. It just is so overwhelmingly beautiful, and maybe you can remove yourself from the headspace of this as a job, and you can really experience it for the real miracle that it is. And once again, I just feel so fortunate to be able to work here and to attempt to make a living, and so far so good. You know, I think every grower will tell you it's way more than a job, and if it's not a labor of love, then it's gonna fall by the wayside because it demands so much of you.